Hi everyone, welcome to NeuroAxis webinar again. My name is Rafał Nowak and I will be your host today. And today we'll be talking about neurofeedback, EEG, and virtual reality. I'm very happy to welcome our guest speakers. We are very happy to have two speakers today. We are honored to have today with us Gianluigi and Diletta. Welcome Gianluigi and Diletta.
Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So please let me quickly introduce our speakers. Gianluigi Ciurlia and Diletta Calcerano are two biomedical engineers, both strongly passionate about neuroscience, particularly in the development of new solutions for the treatment of mental disorders. Throughout their academic studies at the Politecnico di Torino, they have undertaken numerous projects in the university environment. They specialize in biomedical instrumentation, and their academic career encompass various fields, including neuroscience, implantable devices, medical imaging and rehabilitation, and obviously EEG and neurofeedback. Their passion for neuroscience led them to carry out a highly innovative thesis project on stress management, which can also be applied to other mental disorders. So welcome, Diletta and Gianluigi, and the stage is yours.
Good morning, everyone. We're pleased to be here to present our master degree thesis project. The title of the project is Neurofeedback in Virtual Reality Naturalistic Scenarios for Enhancing Relaxation, Visual and Auditory Stimulation to Promote Brain Entrainment. This project was conducted partly at the offices of the GEA Soluzioni company in Turin, which provided us with neuroelectrics instrumentation, and partly in the laboratories of Politecnico di Torino. We will first introduce the main aspects of our thesis, and then we will focus on the experiments conducted. Finally, we will show you the results and the possible future studies. The aim of the project was to realize a neurofeedback system in virtual reality. And let's start by saying what we intend by biofeedback. Biofeedback is a therapy aimed at increasing a subject perception based on the concept of physiological mirroring. So the subject has the opportunity to have real-time updates on changes concerning his physiological parameters that are happening within his or her body. And the aim is to learn from these changes and make further changes take place in order to develop new behavioral techniques. The main important thing is that feedback makes learning possible. And nowadays, biofeedback therapies are used to normalize the functional states of body systems such as the CNS, the cardiovascular system, or the respiratory systems, and more others. So how it works? By means of specific sensors, one or more physiological parameters are acquired, and they are then amplified and processed in real time, and some indexes are extracted from them in order to provide feedback to the subject under the form of easily comprehensible information for the subject himself. So the feedback is provided by some sounds or some visual and auditory information. They are often used some bar indicators or other graphs. Then the biofeedback therapies share three important aspects. The generalization, which is connected to the fact that it's important that the learning that has taken place during the training is also put into practice in everyday life situations. Then we have the extinction, so it's important to consolidate the learning. This means that biofeedback therapies require such a number of sessions depending on the parameter to be learned, and it's important to continue the training after having reached a certain objective, also to consolidate the learning. And then we have discrimination, so it's important to customize the feedback and the stimuli to the subject and to his physiological responses. Nowadays, we have different types of biofeedback, for example, those related to the temperature or electrodermal activity, or those related to the electromyographic activity, which is used to regulate and alleviate muscle tensions. Then we have biofeedback therapies related to the cardiocirculatory system, used to regularize the pulse, the heart rate variability, the hemodynamic responses, blood pressure, and other parameters. Then we have the respiratory biofeedback, and now we reach neurofeedback. Neurofeedback is that particular type of biofeedback which is based on the electroencephalographic signal, so it's connected to brain's rhythm and brain's activity. It is strictly connected to the concept of neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to change its organization and structure over time in response to experience. The principle of working is very similar to that of the other biofeedback therapies. So some sensors are placed in the scalp of the subject, and they are used to take the EEG signal, which records brainwave activity. Then a specific software is used to amplify and process this signal and to extract some indexes. These indexes are then used to provide audio and visual feedback to the subject, and the feedback is used by the brain to train itself and create new habits concerning its electrical activity. The main advantage of neurofeedback is that it is a non-invasive therapy, as well as the other biofeedback therapies, and it does not require the use of drugs. In fact, the main point of difference between the traditional neurofeedback therapy, the traditional neurofeedback therapy and the traditional pharmacological therapy lies in the fact that the first requires consciousness and awareness from the subject, whereas the pharmacological therapy does not. In fact, the drug works indiscriminately with or without the operational consciousness of a patient, and it has an immediate but not permanent effect, whereas the neurofeedback requires the patient to seek a strategy in order to make functional changes happen, and it also requires a learning process. Learning implies a more long-term effect of the therapy. Furthermore, the neurofeedback therapy have very few and rare side effects. For example, the subject can experience headaches or irritability or dizziness, but these are all effects that disappear within 24 hours. And if they do occur, it only happens during the first sessions, because as soon as the subject becomes more aware of the procedure, then they disappear. Nowadays, neurofeedback therapies are used for the treatment of various mental disorders and diseases, such as the attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, anxiety, stress disorders, sleep disorders, the autism spectrum disorders, and also the epilepsy, and more others. But there is a main problem. So the traditional neurofeedback therapies provide the feedback to the subject by means of very, very simple auditory and visual information given by graphs, very simple graphs, very simple information, bar indicators. So this implies that a loss of motivation and of involvement from the subject. But a solution to this problem can be represented by virtual reality.
Virtual reality is a 3D computer-generated simulation that allows the user to interact with the fictitious environment by the use of a specific electronic equipment. Our system can be classified according to the grade of immersivity. We have a semi-immersive, non-immersive virtual reality, which provides the user the lowest level of immersivity. In this case, the environment is shown to the user by a simple 2D desktop, allowing the possibility to interact with the scenario, but not feeling immersed in it. Then we have a semi-immersive virtual reality, and in this case, the environment is shown by a specific 3D desktop. The user is immersed in the scenario, but keeping the contact with reality. Then we have also fully immersive virtual reality. In this case, that system provides the highest level of immersivity, and in this case, the scenario is provided by a head-mounted display that completely isolates the user from reality. That system could also allow the possibility of auditory, sensory, and haptic feedback. Virtual reality has tons of application in the industry sector, and also medicine benefits from virtual reality. Of course, rehabilitation through virtual reality is a technology that allows the user to recover motor and sensory ability lost due to an illness or to an incident. Our system can help the patient to engage difficult training, and being immersed in these virtual scenarios allows the user to complete tasks that they are not able to complete. Then it could be also used for virtual surgery. By the use of this system, the surgeon can see inside of a three-dimensional image, allowing the possibility to simulate the surgery and so reducing time and risk. Then it could be also used for the training of a new surgeon. allowing the possibility to simulate a procedure, and without the burden of a real surgery. Then work system can also lead to an improvement of detection and treatment of neurological disorder. For example, for anxiety or for post-traumatic stress disorder or fear treatment, traditionally exposure method shows directly to the user and to the patient the original reason of the anxiety, thus making the treatment really difficult to accept and leading to an abandonment of the treatment. Being immersed in a virtual scenarios allows the user to perceive the stimulus as is real, but knowing the fact that it is completely immersed in a virtual scenarios make the treatment more safe for the patient. Then it could be also used for other type of neurological disorder like depression or schizophrenia. Virtual reality has shown to be also a good tool for the improvement of neuroplasticity, and so it can be also used for the recovering or the improvement of cognitive function. Virtual reality, the immersivity of virtual reality has shown also to be a key element in order to evoke emotion. And as we said before, the main problem of neurofeedback is that simple and uninteresting design can demotivate and exhaust the patient during the treatment. Thereby, it is of great importance to develop a new and more engaging feedback design. In bio and neurofeedback, when playing a virtual reality game that monitor the physiological state of the patient and in function of a specific parameter adjust the dynamics, the mechanics, the difficulty, or a single element of a game, could be a more engaging treatment and could encourage the patients to maintain a desired physiological condition. Then, several studies also confirm that when comparing simple 2D feedback design to more engaging 3D feedback design, this type of feedback has also a greater performance in a single neurofeedback session. So we really believe that virtual reality has a great potentiality and a bright future in neurofeedback. And that's why the aim of our study was to develop a neurofeedback scenario system in virtual reality in order to promote subject relaxation in the shortest time as possible, also allowing the possibility to face a stressful situation. That's why we decided to add in our protocol a stress test phase. Then we found literature that a naturalistic scenario has a positive effect on mental well-being of the patient. And so we decided to use this type of scenario. And in the picture, we can see the scenario we created in virtual reality. Then to take advantage of the immersivity of virtual reality, we decided to integrate the feedback inside the scenario. And so we decided to give the feedback by a specific element of the scene. That was the density of the fog. Regarding the instrumentation that was used in the study, from the hardware side, we used the Oculus MetaQuest 2 for virtual reality and an Alienware laptop for the creation of the scenario. For the acquisition of the physiological parameter, an OBO8 system from Neuroelectric was used. There is a 8-channel portable device that allows the acquisition of the EEG signal, but also allows the possibility to acquire data from a triaxial accelerometer and then also from the electromyographic and electrocardiographic signal. In the picture, is show our experimental setup with the Oculus MetaQuest and the Anobio mounted on the neoprene headcap also from Neuroelectrics, a really comfortable and really easy to use headcap. Then from the software side, we use the NIC, that stands for Neuroelectrics Instrument Controller, for the sending of the data in real time. For online and offline processing, we use MATLAB, and Unity was used for the creation of the scenario. NIC is a software interface that allows the communication between a Neuroelectrics device and the computer. The communication could be via Bluetooth or via Wi-Fi. And once the devices are connected, you can have the possibility to create more personalized scenario. You can choose what channel to be used in the protocol, and you can choose also all the duration and different phases of the protocol. Then it has the possibility to display in real time all the signal you are acquiring, and also some different graph in real time, like spectrogram. Then we use Unity, that is a graphical motor engine, to create our neurofeedback scenarios. It is a motor engine mostly used for video games, but we want to take advantage of virtual reality, so we decided to use such a powerful tool that allows us to create a scenario more personalized to our needs. Then, of course, the creation of a neurofeedback scenarios entails the creation of a closed loop system. In our cases, the data was sent from the NOV8 to NIC via Bluetooth, and then sent in real time from NIC to MATLAB by an LSR connection that stands for lab streaming layer. Then, on MATLAB, some index was extracted and sent to Unity via TCP/IP connection, and Unity managed the feedback on the advanced display in real time. LSR connection is an open source middleware software that allows the communication between software and device, and receiving and sending of physiological parameters. At the bottom of your stack, there is a library called the LibLSL, which allows communication, and contains also some wrappers for different languages. It is really easy to use because it's full of example project, and the connection happens founding the stream. Once you found the stream, you open an inlet on the stream, and then you can pull your samples, your data sample by sample or in chunks of data. The particularity of this connection is that no IP addresses are needed.
So both the electroencephalographic and the electrocardiographic signals were acquired in our project, and the first was used to perform the training itself, while the latter, so the ECG signal, was only monitored during the training, and it was then analyzed offline. The analysis of the EEG signal in frequency domain allows the detection of stress level based on the alpha band power and the beta band power. In fact, the alpha frequencies are those frequencies related to the mental creative of the brain, and the alpha band is the band devoted to the mental relaxation, whereas the beta band is the band devoted to mental performance, so attention and concentration. The ratio between the beta band power and the alpha band power, so the bar index, has shown in numerous studies of literature to be a very reliable index to examine the progression of an individual cognitive state. So we're speaking of mental alertness, stress levels of a subject, and consequently relaxation level of a subject. So we decided to use the bar index in our study as the feedback parameter, and it was calculated in the occipital channel, so O1 channel and O2 channel, which are the site of the visual cortex, being this a study based on virtual reality. And the mean value between the bar calculated in O1 and the bar calculated in O2 was provided every 500 milliseconds as a feedback parameter. Then we also analyzed the frontal alpha asymmetry, which is an index which analyzes the difference in the activation of alpha band in the frontal right lobe with respect to the frontal left lobe. But this index was not so reliable as the bar index. So we decided to not use it as the feedback parameter. It was only monitored in post-processing. Then from the electrocardiographic signal analyzed in time domain, the heart rate and the heart rate variability were extracted. The heart rate variability analyzes the temporal changes in the RR interval of the QRS complexes. And it was calculated by mean of a statistical parameter, which is called the root mean square of successive differences, which analyzes temporal variations in a very short period of time. And it is an index related to the parasympathetic nervous system related to the heart. So the higher is the value of the RMSST, the higher is the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system. This means a greater psychological stability of the subject and a reduced stress state. So we also decided to support the neurofeedback, so to add to the typical visual feedback also a stimulation in order to exploit the phenomenon of brain entrainment. Brain entrainment is a particular response of the brain to external rhythmic stimuli, but it is not so much clear phenomenon. It is very studied. In fact, we only know that rhythmic external stimuli set at specific frequency can selectively modulate the brain oscillations. And in particular, we distinguish induced oscillations and evoked oscillations. The first is a response of the brain to an external stimulus unrelated with it in time, while the evoked oscillation is a response of the brain to an external stimulus which is correlated, so synchronized in time with the stimulus itself. And the entrained oscillations are part of the evoked oscillations. The interesting note is that entrained oscillations have shown resonance frequencies which are very similar to the frequencies of spontaneous EEG. And this is confirmation of the fact that this type of stimulation do not generate new oscillatory responses, but it rather brings back the activity of an individual intrinsic oscillator. So in practice, when a certain external stimulus is presented, the subject intrinsic oscillator eventually synchronizes with it in time, and then it reaches a properly phased lock. It returns back, to its frequency, spontaneous frequency. But if the stimulus persists, then a new phase locking is generated, and so on. So since different cognitive and mental states can be associated with different dominant brain waves frequencies, it is hypothesized that brain entrainment might induce a desired state. And since the aim of the study was to increase the power in the alpha band of the subject, we decided to integrate a visual and auditory stimulation in order to promote the relaxation of the subject. The principal characteristic of brain entrainment is that if the frequency of the external stimulus matches the frequency of the intrinsic oscillator, then a successful entrainment is gained. The frequency of a subject intrinsic oscillator corresponds to the individual alpha frequency, which is the frequency set at the peak of the alpha band of the subject. And according to the Arnold-Stone theory, stimuli which are presented at the IAF of the subject and have a certain amplitude reach the same degree of entrainment, so the same degree of phase locking, while as soon as the frequency of the external stimulus moves away from the IAF of the subject, a greater level of amplitude is required to gain the same successful entrainment. And if we plot the results of this theory as a function of the stimulation frequency and of the stimulation intensity, we obtain this inverted triangle, which is called the Arnold-Stone. So we decided to prove this theory in order to establish the frequency at which to set our visual and auditory stimuli. And at this proposal, we created a new scenario in Unity, which generated 35 different combinations of strobes, white strobes in a black background. And we combined 5 different amplitudes and 7 different frequencies. In particular, the frequencies were centered at the IAF plus or minus 3 Hz, while the 5 amplitudes were set linearly, starting from the lowest amplitude value intensity, which was perceptible by the subject maintaining his eyes closed and wearing the oculus, and the highest level, which was not too annoying for the subject. So before the acquisition, a 3 minutes acquisition to determine the individual alpha frequency was done, maintaining the eyes closed. So if we suppose to have found an individual alpha frequency of 10.6 Hz, then the first combination of stimulation started. So the intensity 1 and the frequency 1, then the intensity 1 and the frequency 2, and in sequence until the frequency 7. Then the second level of intensity with the 7 level of frequencies, and so on. So each combination remains active for 30 seconds, and then it was followed by 2 seconds pause. Once the acquisition was finished, we then analyzed this data in MATLAB and offline, and we generated 35 square waves which could simulate our stimulation strobes, and then we overlapped with the EEG signal corresponding. So in this case, both signals were filtered with a bandpass filter centered at IAF plus or minus 3.5 Hz, and then the Hilbert transform and the unwrapped angles were calculated on those signals. Then, in order to evaluate the degree of entrainment which was generated by each combination of strobes, the normalized Shannon entropy was calculated on the phase shifts, and the higher was the value of the normalized Shannon entropy, the higher was the degree of entrainment. So in this graph, we show you the overlap of the red signal, which is the stimulation signal, and the blue signal, which is the EEG corresponding signal, for one of the combinations set at the individual alpha frequency. And we can see how the two signals start out of phase in the first part of the graph. Then the blue one is dragged towards the red one, so it's getting synchronized to the stimulation until it reaches properly phase locking, and then it returns back to its rhythm, so to its natural frequency. Then we also analyzed the 35 different values of normalized Shannon entropy, and we plot them through a color map. By this graph, we can see that the highest level of brain entrainment is gained for those combinations set at the individual alpha frequency, but we cannot appreciate a proper triangle, so a proper ulnar tongue. This is probably due to the fact that we didn't have the right instrumentation to do this proof. So we didn't have a photostimulator which could generate strobes at precise frequencies and precise intensities. And we also compared in MATLAB a real EEG signal, but with a simulated stimulation signal, so the 35 square waves, because we didn't have the opportunity to export the real stimulation signal from Unity. So we decided to insert the auditory and visual stimulation set at the individual alpha frequency of the subject, which was individuated before each training session. So regarding the auditory stimulation, we compared two different auditory stimulation, the monaural and binaural beats. The binaural beats have shown in numerous studies of literature to be real mean to reduce the anxiety level and stress level of a subject. But in recent few years, also the monaural waves are starting to be evaluated. And if we want to generate these two types of beats, we start in both cases by two different waves at two different frequencies close to each other. In the case of monaural beats, modulation in amplitude is required, and the resulting signal is provided to one or to both ears simultaneously, whereas in the case of binaural beats, the two starting waves are provided separately to the two ears, so one to the right and one to the left ear. And the sound resulted is that a sensation of a sound localized within a subject head. And this is probably the thing that makes believe that the binaural beats are a mean of relaxation. But recent studies have demonstrated that binaural beats do not generate brain entrainment, whereas the monaural beats provoke strong auditory response. This is probably due to the fact that in the case of monaural beats, being a single sound provided to both ears simultaneously, the information is processed in the cochlea, whereas in the case of binaural beats, an integration of information is required, and this happens in the brainstem at the level of superior olivary nucleus. So we decided to use monaural beats set at the individual alpha frequency to provide our auditory stimulus.
Now let's talk about our study protocol. First of all the acquisition was held at Politecnico di Torino, and we had a total of 9 sessions, 3 per week for 3 weeks. The protocol starts with the determination of the individual alpha frequency. That phase lasts for 3 minutes, and the signal is taken from the channel O1, O2, and PZ. The subject in this case sits comfortably on a chair wearing the oculus switched off. And the only thing he has to do is to remain in a quiet state and to close his eyes for the entire duration of the phase. Then the real virtual reality experience starts, and the first phase is the baseline. In this case, the signal is taken from from channel O1, O2, F3, F4, and the electrocardiographic signal. The baseline lasts for 3 minutes, and it shows to the user a simple scenario, and it is used only to compare the subject activational mental state before and after the stimulation. Then we had the stress test phase with the mathematical task under stressful condition. Also, this phase lasts for 3 minutes. And then we had the proper relaxation phase that lasts for 15 minutes. And it was the only phase in which stimulation and feedback was given to the user. Then we repeated the baseline and the individual alpha frequency calculation as previously described. Now let's analyze also more in detail the scenario we created. Regarding the stress test, we created a mathematical operation task under stressful condition in a gloomy setting, in particular a dark dungeon, with also a higher stressful music. In this case, a simple operation is displayed in a video, and the subject has 10 seconds to answer if the result shown on a video is correct or false. If it didn't give any answer, or if it gives the wrong answer, an explosion is triggered to increase the subject stress. Then, in the last 30 seconds of the stress test, there is also an alarm light. Now we are going to show a video of the environment and the stress test we created. And now moving to the relaxation scenario, as we said before, naturalistic settings has a positive effect on mental well-being. So we decided to create this type of scenario. We created a lake, and we created some hills and vegetation, and also a waterfall. Then we also added a relaxation music, a relaxing music. Then, to take advantage of the immersivity of virtual reality, we insert the feedback using an element of the scenario, so the density of the fog. And to create the visual and auditory stimulation, we use a Unity package on free download for the generation of the monaural beats. And for the auditory stimulation, we use 3 different point lights that flickers at the frequency of the individual alpha frequency. And we decided also to hide these visual stimulation in order to make the stimulation less annoying for the patient. And now we see the video with the point light. Now there is also the feedback with the value of the bar, and of course higher value of the bar index means higher fog density, and lower value of the bar means, of course, lower density of the fog. I want only to precise that the monaural beat you're hearing in this video is probably due to an exportation problem, is much higher than the monaural beat you can perceive on the Oculus. So they were less annoying. Then, once the protocol has ended, we move to the post-processing analysis. Regarding the electroencephalographic signal, after a filtering between 4 and 40 Hz with a 6-order bandpass Chebyshev filter to remove low-frequency artifacts like the eye blinking, and to remove the line noise, we perform the power spectral density extraction, and then we remove the outlier using the median absolute deviation method. And in the picture, I'll show 2 trends of a single training session for channel 01 and 02. That is the signal in the first baseline, the bar parameters in the first baseline, the stress test, and in the relaxation phase, and then in the second baseline. The similar analysis was performed also in the electrocardiographic signal, in which we made a filtering between 4 and 100 Hz. And after the detection of the R peak of the complex QRS, we evaluated the duration of the RR interval used for the calculation of the heart rate and the heart rate variability parameter. Then, to evaluate the performance of a single training session, box plots were created. These box plots representing the trend of each parameter, in this case the bar parameter, or in a single training session. Then to have a larger statistical sample, we concatenated the value from all the different training and normalizing it by the absolute value of the median in the first baseline. This box plot contains the value of the central minutes of the first baseline, the central minutes of the stress test, the minutes from the minutes 1, 5, 10, and 15 for the relaxation phase, and the central minutes of the second baseline. We can clearly see in this picture that there is a strong increase of the bar value in the stress test phase. That is, of course, due to an increased beta rhythm due to the stress and the concentration of the patient. And then we can see a decrease in the bar value due to an increased alpha rhythm, and so due to a relaxation, a reached relaxation in the patient during the relaxation phase. Then we also hypothesized that our training has a long-lasting effect, and to verify this, to confirm this hypothesis, we made a comparison between the first and then the second baseline. And of course, this comparison this analysis confirmed the initial hypothesis that our training has a long-lasting effect and not only constrained in the relaxation phase. In fact, we had a mean value of the first baseline of the bar in the first baseline of about 1.2 for both channel, or 1 and 2, and then mean value in the second baseline about 0.8 for both of the channels. So we confirmed this hypothesis. Then similar analysis was made for the frontal alpha symmetry, and in this case, we didn't see any changes of the parameter during the treatment. That is probably due to the fact that this wasn't chosen as a feedback parameter and is always associated with a depression state. And in the case of the ECG signal, we also evaluate a similar analysis. In this case, the box plot representing all the 3 minutes of the first baseline, all the 3 minutes of the stress test and the second baseline, and the central 3 minutes of the relaxation phase. We can clearly see also in this case that both parameters are the trend we expected. In fact, we can see an increase in the heart rate during the stress test and a strong decrease of the heart rate during the relaxation phase. Also, in the heart rate variability, we can see a decrease of this parameter in the stress phase and an increase during the relaxation phase. But of course, these changes are less evident with respect to the heart rate. Then a similar analysis to confirm the initial hypothesis that our training has a long-lasting effect was performed for the electrocardiographic signal. In particular, in the case of the heart rate, we confirm that hypothesis. In fact, the values are statistically inferior to the value in the second baseline are statistically inferior to the value in the first baseline. But the same statistical difference wasn't found in the case of the heart rate variability. For the electrocardiographic signal, we also performed a comparison between the value of the stress test and the relaxation phase. Of course, for the heart rate, this difference was evident also in the previous graph, but we also found an interesting statistical differences in the case of the heart rate variability.
So while the box plots were used to evaluate the training in the single sessions, we also decided to extract some indexes in the process signals in order to evaluate the training over the whole 3 weeks, so during the entire training. In fact, neurofeedback training therapies requires 8 to 10 sessions, and we have decided to evaluate the training over the time. So extracted from the relaxation phase 3 indexes from the EEG signal and 3 indexes from the ECG signal. We have a max relaxation score, which is the minimum value of the bar which remains stable in a range of 5% for at least 10 seconds. Then we have time interval to relaxation, which represents the amount of time it takes a subject to reach a certain threshold and maintain it for 20 seconds. In this case, the threshold was set as the 80% of the mean value of the bar reached in the relaxation phase of the first session. And then we have the Tmax, which is defined as the maximum amount of time the subject was able to maintain continuously the bar below the defined threshold. The results of these indexes are plotted here, and we also performed a linear regression in order to better visualize this trend. We can observe that the bar levels have a decreasing trend. We start from 0.63 in the first session down to 0.43 in the last session. And we also have a down peak of 0.25 in the sixth session, which was by far the best session in relaxation phase. Then we have also decreasing trend in the time interval to relaxation. We start with 11 minutes in the first session, and we end with 2.5 minutes in the last session. This is a demonstration of the fact that the subject has managed to establish her own strategy, and this strategy seems to have repeatable and always better results. Then we also have an increasing trend for the Tmax. This means that the subject is able to maintain her bar below the threshold for an always increasing time, and this means a greater perception and a greater awareness of her brain rhythms that has acquired during the 3 weeks of training. Then we also extracted 3 indexes from the ECG signal, which was the minimum heart rate value reached in each training session, the maximum heart rate variability, so the maximum value of RMSSD reached in each training session, and then we have the time interval to relaxation also for the ECG channel signal, which was the amount of time it takes a subject to reach 86 BPM and maintain it for at least 2.5 minutes. And also in this case, we can plot the results. So we have a decreasing trend in the minimum heart rate, starting with 82 BPM, ending with 78 BPM. Then we have an increasing trend in the maximum heart rate variability. This means that during the 3 weeks, the subject has a greater activation of the parasympathetic nervous system. So she gains a major psychological stability, and she manages to decrease the anxiety level, so the anxiety and the stress level. And then we can also see a light decreasing trend in time interval to relaxation. We can say that all things concerned, the ECG signal was a reliable enough signal, although less variable than the EEG signal. And this is probably due to the fact that the electroencephalographic, directly reflecting the central nerve activity, is more directly connected to the psychological stability of the subject with respect to more peripheral signals and indexes such as the heart rate variability in this case. We can now conclude with so the study confirms that the combination of virtual reality and neurofeedback might be therapeutically useful for the management of different mental states, but this is only an introductory study, so it requires a more detailed analysis. In fact, the developed system has only been tested on a healthy patient. This surely paves the way for progress on various types of studies on patients with different mental diseases, especially anxiety, panic disorders, phobias, or stress disorders. And surely both technical and protocol improvements can be done. For example, by technical point of view, we could think of integrate a cumulative or non-cumulative prize during the single session to give an instant feedback to the subject at the moment he reaches a better result than the previous session. So this could improve the subject involvement and could spur him on doing more. While from a more analytical point of view, it's important to discern the neurofeedback effects from the brain entrainment effects. And at this proposal, more detailed study should be done on 3 different groups. For example, 2 active groups, which one is given only the feedback and the other is given both the feedback and the stimulation, and a third non-active control group. So thank you for the attention. And we also would like to thank Rosa, Rafael, and JT for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Actually, congratulations. And actually, we have to thank also to your supervisors regarding this work.
Yeah.
Professor Luca Mesin and Giovanni.
Yeah. And Giovanni.
This is great. So we are opening the Q&A slot. We are ready to take some questions. And let me ask you only, like, I was wondering if you were able to actually use any independent tests in terms of behavioral measurement, like anxiety inventory test, to check actually the state of the subjects before and after training session, to have like independent measurement what was going with neurofeedback.
We could probably use some questionnaires. For example, there is a questionnaire which is called STAI, which is like an attitudinal questionnaire, which works like this. So it analyzes your anxiety level, your stress level. Yeah, but I mean, you didn't use this in your work. No, we didn't use it because we only tested in one person, so it was not so much important for us. Okay. It should be done surely for next studies. So if this protocol is tested on a group of people, of course, it's necessary. Yet. Okay, thank you. Let's go to the questions from our audience. We have the question from Dharma. And the question is, why was the beta alpha ratio calculated at the visual cortex in O1 and O2? Why you are measuring the EEG at O1 and O2 positions, not other positions from EEG, etc.? Because from many studies of literature, the bar was more reliable to detect in that zone, that area of the cerebral cortex, and also because it's the visual cortex, so it's the area in which the alpha band is more pronounced. Okay, so there is a follow-up question actually from Dharma, if the fog stimulus could somehow affect the alpha at O1 and O2, especially with regards to the visual processing.
Yeah, we really don't know, because the study was a single case study, so we didn't have the opportunity to stimulate, to have a control group with or without the neurofeedback, so the fog density. So we didn't have the opportunity to try these, but probably the fog density could also affect the bar value on the O1 and O2 channel. That is, there has to be that need several studies to confirm that.
Okay, thank you. We have some like more technical question from Ibrahim. What type of electrodes did you use, gel or dry, for EEG recording?
We use silver chloride electrode filled with conductive gel. Okay, and what is the sampling frequency for EEG, and what can be a proper frequency resolution for individual alpha frequency? For the EEG acquisition, we had a sampling rate of 500 Hz. And for the resolution of the individual alpha frequency, we use a resolution of 0.5 Hz. Okay, and there's a question regarding visual screen feedback refresh rate. It's if you could actually be sure that it's correct and stable, so in terms of virtual reality scenario.
I think you have to.
We checked with the sampling rate with the frame per second with using the Unity, and so we thought that the frame rate was always really high, so we think that was stable.
You have to have a good laptop, because our laptop didn't work with the protocol. We took an Alienware from the Politecnico.
Okay, okay, thank you. And there is another question from Thomas asking regarding the specific index beta alpha, where you were mentioning at the beginning that beta frequency range is associated with cognitive functions, and there is the long-standing knowledge rating gamma frequency actually to cognitive performance, and more beta with the motor functions. So what's your opinion regarding using gamma frequency as a feedback parameters instead of beta frequency or beta alpha ratio?
We did some study in literature for the first month of the project, and we then decided to use the beta because it was the much mentioned in study of literature to the stress and relaxation analysis.
Okay, and then from my understanding is that you are using the bar index and not frontal asymmetry, alpha asymmetry either. And this was related to this previous research review?
We analyzed both the bar and both the alpha symmetry, but the alpha symmetry was not so stable. So the bar was much more stable as an index. The frontal alpha asymmetry had two spikes, very much spikes. So it was not so easy to control that parameter.
Okay.
Probably because because the frontal channels are too close to the ocular channels, so they are full of artifacts, and it's too difficult to use that index for this project.
Okay, Gianluigi,
probably also the frontal alpha symmetry is also more associated with depression, and of course that was probably that's why we didn't found statistically changes during the neurofeedback session with the frontal alpha symmetry.
Okay, and I want to actually come back to, so you are trying to find and to show the Arnold-Stonk theory and to find the graphic for your individual frequency entrainment, but you couldn't show this exactly. You haven't seen the Arnold-Stonk.
Yes.
This was related to some details that you couldn't specific sensitivity of the instrument, what we were mentioning.
We obtained like a rectangle, not properly a triangle, but we suppose that this is due to the fact that we didn't have a photostimulator to provide these probes. We generated the strobes from Unity, so we are not sure of the frequency, so the perfection of the frequencies and of the amplitudes of the strobes generated.
Okay, okay. And with regards to heart rate and heart rate variability, so we are measuring, but this was not fed into neurofeedback response.
Yeah, yes, they were only monitored. We did neurofeedback. We did not do the cardiovascular feedback.
Okay.
But it showed interesting results. So we could think of continue maybe with this and analyze, maybe use the ECG signal to provide feedback. It could be an interesting thing, sure.
Okay, and then the degree of entrainment that you were showing was based on the Shannon entropy. Yeah. And then you could show that there was a moment with specific entrainment over the ongoing brain activity.
Yeah, the green part was related to the levels of normalized Shannon entropy related to the stimuli set at the individual alpha frequency. So we had 35 combinations of stimuli. Those which were set at the individual alpha frequency and which have 5 different amplitudes showed the greatest level of normalized Shannon entropy, which was the green space in that color map.
Okay, okay, thank you. And like a general question, what would be the next step? What would be the next step with the solution? Actually, I would say this like the proof of concept, what you are showing us here. So what would be next step with the development, with the application, where we can go with this?
We don't know, because we only did this project for our degree thesis. So we imagine that maybe other students can continue our work and do their thesis, continuing our project. We hope so.
I also think that a good application for this study could be for example, for anxiety or for post-traumatic stress disorder. You can substitute our stress test to the original reason of the post-traumatic stress disorder of the patient, and so using virtual reality to recreate the post-traumatic stress, the stress origin, and after the neurofeedback relaxation scenario, we think that it could be a possible application for this protocol, for example.
Okay, thank you. That's very good feedback regarding the future. We have a question from Romain. In case of individual alpha frequency stimulation, how long should be the stimulation before phase locking occur?
It is quite immediate, but it never remains phase locked with the stimulus. So the intrinsic oscillator tries to reach the rhythm of the external stimulus, then it gains the phase locking, and then it returns back to the original frequency. But if the stimulus, for example, persists at that frequency, then a new phase lock is generated.
Okay, thank you. And I think the closing remark, comment from Professor Ciurlia Giovanni, with the best compliments to Diletta and Gianluigi. This was supposed to be a preliminary study, but the results are already very interesting. And we'll actually, sorry, so Giovanni is from University of Turin. It's your supervisor.
He's our doctoral student who followed us in the project.
So we will certainly continue these studies at Politecnico, pushing further in this direction. And he hopes that other interesting results can be obtained, and there will be other good opportunities like this to share them. So thank you really very much for this presentation, for these great results, for great actually framework on the combining EEG, virtual reality, neurofeedback, heart rate, different parameters, different metrics, MATLAB in the middle, and giving actually solutions for the future for the clinical applications. So thank you very much. We'll have next webinar. Thank you. We'll have next webinar actually in 2 weeks already. We'll have Dr. Mark Mutalib, and then we'll switch to functional near-infrared spectroscopy and transcranial electrical stimulation. So we'll be talking about FNIRS and TES. So you can find all information on our webpage, neuroelectric.com, and then you will find the registration. And the final and logistical information, all these webinars are available on our repository on YouTube channel. So if you go to youtube.com neuroelectrics, there is a video recording repository when you can find all previous webinars, and there will be Diletta and Gianluigi. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
It was a pleasure. Bye-bye.